Alrighty, everyone, this is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for a quick little tropical update about Hurricane Lee. Hurricane Lee, unfortunately, overnight really ran into some wind shear, and that did weaken it quite a bit. We'll take a look at that here in just a quick moment. As I like to do with these tropical updates, just for those of you who may be new to these, we talk a lot about, category 1, 2, 3 hurricanes. What does all that mean? Well, let's take a quick little look here in the Atlantic, East Pacific, and Central Pacific. We rate hurricanes in any tropical system based on what is known as the Saffir-Simpson scale. Now, the Saffir-Simpson scale uses solely the highest wind speed within the storm to basically give it its rating. Hurricane Lee started off as tropical depression number 13. That is the weakest one, and tropical depressions have winds of less than 38 miles an hour. They are not named when they're a tropical depression, they just have a number. Once the winds get to 39 miles an hour, it becomes a tropical storm. We then name the system based on a list of already predetermined names. And in this case, Tropical Depression 13 became Tropical Storm Lee. Tropical Storm Lee, Lee is going to hold that name no matter what happens. Even if it goes back down to Tropical Depression, it'll still be called Lee. Once the system gets to winds of 74 miles an hour or greater, it becomes a hurricane. So in that case, and then we categorize the hurricanes on 5 categories: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is the highest category, and it just has winds of 157 miles an hour or greater. There's no upper bound for it. So yesterday morning, Hurricane Lee was a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 165 miles an hour. When we did our weather chat last evening, it was a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 150 miles an hour. Now Lee has taken quite a beating during the overnight hours, and look at it there on the satellite imagery. Geez, it is not looking quite as good. It still has that deep convection though right around the center. That's what you see kind of pulsing up there. That turns into that white color. This is an infrared satellite imagery, folks. This just measures the temperature of the cloud top. So again, we can see, when those storms really kind of explode, the cloud tops get pretty high. They become very cold. And that's what those white colors that you see there. So there still is a center. However, Lee's wind speed's 115 miles an hour. That is a heck of a drop. What happened is it ran into some wind shear. That has really disrupted the system. Now, there's still some uncertainty as to how long this wind shear will persist. There is some indications that it will relax a little bit as we head through the rest of the day today and maybe going into the evening. That could allow Lee to maybe re-intensify just a little bit more. But again, there's a lot of uncertainties now at this point here as to what exactly Lee is going to do over the next day or two in terms of its intensity. What we do know is that there is an upper level ridge to its north. We took a look at that more in depth last night during our weather chat. So if you didn't get a chance to watch that one, make sure you go back and watch it. We were taking a look at one of the models, and I was kind of showing where that ridge is. But because that ridge is there, that's why Lee is kind of on this west-northwesterly track. It can't, turn north like it would want to. But by the time we get towards the middle part of next week, that ridge will likely begin to break down, and Lee will start to take more of a northerly turn. It will probably it'll be a pretty strong hurricane during that time. The question at this point is just how strong is it going to be? And again, part of the problem with that is the wind shear, and also maybe the possibility of, even if when it does re-intensify, it could have another little eye wall replacement cycle that could happen, and that could temporarily weaken it. So the intensity part of the forecast the Hurricane Center is saying is just kind of very uncertain at this time. Again, some things like the wind shear and eventually maybe some future eye wall replacements if it manages to get back up, to its intensity. So is Lee going to be making a landfall in the U.S.? Right now, it is still way too early to tell. What we do know, looking at the model data going, long range out, is that once Lee begins to make that northerly turn, and that's going to be because the ridge that's keeping it down to the south right now begins to kind of break down, Lee will start to make a northerly turn, and it looks like it'll kind of continue that northerly direction beyond what you see there on the forecast. So without going too far out, ahead into speculation, right now it does look like once it begins to make that turn, it'll keep making, it'll keep that northerly direction there. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. Maybe something that the Canadian Maritimes or maybe parts of New England might have to keep an eye on. Right now, it does not look like it'll be something that, Florida or the Bahamas will really have to keep much of an eye on, at least with the way things look right now. All right, so that's just kind of a quick little update there. One thing I do want to show you is that Lee is passing by a buoy out in the open waters of the Atlantic, and that is buoy 41044. We've been talking about it, and we got some great pictures from it. Let's go ahead and we'll flip over the screen here, and we'll take a look here. This is one of the buoys that is out in the open waters here, and right now I think they're getting about 21-foot waves out there. Winds right now, they're gusting about 53 miles an hour. Take a look at that. Now, it is starting to get a little bit dark out there, mind you, but we should have still at least a pretty good view here. Might be a little hard to see on this particular camera here, but from where I can see it here on my monitor, you can actually kind of see that that water kind of well, you have the waves. You can see the water, but we got the waves. You can see some of that sea spray kind of blowing off the top of it, so it looks really cool there. For those of you, I always like to make the analogy. It looks just like, have you ever seen the movie The Perfect Storm? One of my favorite movies of all time. Kind of looks a little bit like that there. Unfortunately, I can't get this picture a little bit bigger. That's something I'll work on this afternoon. So let's take a look exactly where this buoy is in relevance to Hurricane Lee. So we got the center, which is right here. This is the 11 a.m. Eastern time. This is the 11 a.m. Eastern time point right there. All right. This is the wind field. It's estimated, but again, it's a pretty good estimation. The hurricane hunters have been flying, in and around the storm, so we got a pretty good measurement here. So this light color that you see here, this kind of teal color, those are tropical storm force winds of 39 to 56 miles an hour. Okay, so when we took a look at the Saffir-Simpson scale, tropical storm force winds were anything from 39 to 73 miles an hour. So let's go ahead and we'll go back up to the radar here, or excuse me, this particular map. So this is the 39 to 56 mile an hour, wind radius here. Okay. This green color are tropical storm force winds up, from 57 to 73 miles an hour. And that orange color that you see right there are the hurricane force winds. So again, we talk about a hurricane having these high winds. Keep in mind that the whole thing does not have those incredibly high winds. This whole thing does not have 115 mile an hour winds. It's just a small part right around the center, and we typically would call that the eye wall. We were talking a lot about that with Adelia. We were looking at the eye wall when it was making its landfall in Florida there, and that's where the highest winds were. But in this case of Lee, the same thing. The highest winds are not the entire hurricane. It's just a small part right around the center. So if this orange color is the hurricane force winds, okay? This is the hurricane force winds. If we drag that out from the center, that means the hurricane force winds only extend about 25 to 30 miles out from the center of Lee. That's not very big. So that is a very tight gradient. So those 115 mile an hour winds are likely right here in that small little area. So with that in mind, we have the buoy, and this is 41001. You can see it's right in that. So we use this buoy here, and we kind of get a good confirmation that the estimated wind fields are doing pretty well. We got a sustained wind of about 38 miles an hour, gusting to just about 49 miles an hour, maybe a little bit more at times. And again, that puts it right there, 39 to 56 mile an hour sustained wind area. So that buoy confirms that that estimation is pretty good. We have a sustained wind of 38 miles an hour at that buoy. That falls right into the category there of this wind field. Now, mind you, those winds are going to be increasing, and it looks like this buoy is going to get grazed by some of those higher tropical storm force winds. And if Lee does manage to intensify a little bit more, naturally, that wind field might expand a little bit. So the center here of Lee, as we go towards this through the afternoon and into the evening, is going to be passing just to the southwest of that buoy. Let's go ahead and see how far away from the center from the buoy that the center is expected to be from. And again, the cone is kind of where the center could end up being. Now, obviously, this is very important. I just want to bring this up really quickly. When we take a look at these, the wind field and everything, you can see how the wind field expands beyond the cone. The cone that you see here, this is where the center could be. All right, so the center could end up maybe over here. Obviously, the hurricane force conditions will extend a little bit, beyond that, at least in the near term. So you get the idea that the cone is not where the hurricane conditions are going to be. The cone is where the center of the storm will be, if that makes any sense. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how close This, let's see how close this buoy is going to be. By the time we get towards the evening, it's only going to be about 50 miles, 55 miles away from the center of Lee if Lee follows that exact track. So again, pretty close pass, but we know that the hurricane force winds really only extend about 25 miles out from the center of Lee, 25 to 30 miles out from the center. So it looks like the hurricane force winds will probably pass just south of this buoy. But if Lee does manage to re-intensify this afternoon, we could see that wind field expanding a little bit. So it'll be pretty interesting. We'll keep an eye on this buoy as we go throughout the day. Obviously, some great pictures there as long as this, as long as it's still daytime. Once the sun begins to set, unfortunately, we probably won't be able to see much from it, but we'll still get the observations. So it'll be pretty interesting to watch. So buoy 41044 out there in the Atlantic Ocean. Gonna get kind of a good view here. And we also are probably gonna have another buoy later on as we go later on into the forecast here. Let's take a look. There is another one that is gonna be to the southwest of Lee's path. And this is 41046 right now. Pretty quiet there. Look at that, sunny skies. I guess we would consider that partly cloudy skies. Winds are pretty light there. Air temperature 85 degrees. The water temperature is also about 85 degrees. So pretty favorable, at least water temperature for a hurricane. But there might be some wind shear issues. So we got a couple buoys that are going to be around it here. You can take a look there. Pretty cool nonetheless. So we'll have maybe another good pass by as we go into what day is this going to be? The 13th. So Wednesday morning we could have another little pass by. We'll see how that looks. So that is the situation right now with Lee. We also got Margaret out there in the open waters. Margaret right now, just a tropical storm. Again, the same ridge that's kind of keeping Lee down is also kind of keeping this one down a little bit, but the part of that ridge is going to start to break a little bit, and that's what's going to help Margaret turn a little bit to the north here over the next couple of days. Right now, it's a tropical storm, winds with it 45 miles an hour, not very strong at all. It's going to maintain tropical storm intensity, but could start to intensify, possibly becoming a hurricane by the time we get towards Monday evening. But if we zoom out here, you can see Margaret going to be staying mainly out in the open waters of the Atlantic, at least for the foreseeable future. So not really much to talk about with Margaret. We also have Jova. We were talking about it the other day. It was a Category 5 hurricane. We had it on the satellite imagery. It was really good looking. Well, it has entered much colder waters and just a less favorable environment. Now it is a tropical storm with winds of 55 miles an hour, and it is likely going to continue to weaken and basically become nothing more at that point. So that is kind of a look right now at what is going on, at least in the immediate tropical area. That includes, well, I guess the east and central and North Atlantic here. But so that's kind of what we got going on at this time. So pretty interesting. One thing that you did hear me mention about earlier when Lee first developed, as I told you, it came off the Cape Verde area. We call those Cape Verde hurricanes. They tend to be during the fall. You can see both Margaret and Lee both came off the West African coast. Both of these initially were just a grouping of storms that made their way through Africa. They made their way over the water and continued to get organized. So these are long track systems. And like I said, the Cape Verde hurricanes, they can get pretty strong. And some of our strongest hurricanes that we've seen, make a landfall in the U.S. or somewhere in North America, a lot of them were Cape Verde hurricanes. So again, they came Cape Verde Islands right around here. And then again, they came off the West African coast. You could see with Lee, there it was, tracking its way all the way through. So this storm, these ones have very long lives, and well, generally they live pretty long and they can get pretty strong. So we'll keep an eye on Lee right now, Category 3. It is expected to maybe intensify just a little bit during the day today or overnight tonight. It may become a Category 4 hurricane yet again by the time we get towards the end of the weekend and starting off next work week. And then it's going to begin to turn to the north. So a strong hurricane nonetheless. Intensity forecast still a little spotty at times. And again, part of that is just the wind shear and a few other things that are going on. But we'll keep an eye on Lee for you guys here as we go through the rest of the day today. We'll have another little update, and all things considered, should be pretty interesting to keep an eye on. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that buoy that is out there in the open waters of the Atlantic. That's going to be kind of a cool shot when that does try to pass by it. So overall, folks, that's kind of a quick little update on Hurricane Lee. Again, still way too far out to determine if it'll make a landfall in the U.S. or in Canada. maybe we would, if that were to happen, it'd probably be next weekend, at least with the way the timing of the system looks to be. But again, there's a lot of uncertainties with it, so we just can't really give an answer at that time. But it is something that is still certainly a possibility with Lee. With that in mind, everyone, we'll see you back here a little bit later on. I hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon. Enjoy some of those football games out there. And hey, we'll keep an eye on Lee. Have a good one, everyone.